everyone. I'm Kasey Hower. I'm a dairy educator with Penn State Extension based out of Berks County. And today for our tip of the month, I just want to go over particle distribution of your forages and your TMR. So if you're not familiar, within Penn State we have developed the Penn State Particle Separator. And it's actually not new. It was first introduced in 1996 and developed by Dr. Judd Heinrichs to replace the lab method of looking at particle distribution. And originally when it was developed with these four sieves in front of me, with this 19mm screen, an 8mm screen, a 1.18mm screen, and then a bottom pan. And the way that this box works is you shake a forage or a TMR sample out and you can look at how it separates out in each of these sieves. And it's supposed to mimic how they would actually separate out in the rumen of the cow. So a lot of those longer forages on these top screens would form the rumen mat, which helps a cow with her chewing and rumination, which creates saliva and helps regulate the pH of her rumen. And then on these bottom sieves is what our more fine particles would be, which would settle to the bottom of the rumen and be more digestible. And what Penn State did is they developed recommendations on how much of each feedstuff should be left in this sieve after the shaking process. But in 2013, they actually did some editing of the box, and instead of having this 1.18mm screen, they took that out and replaced it with a 4mm screen. And that's because during additional research, they found that particles that are around this 4mm or less were passing through the rumen. It wasn't anything that was the 1.18 or below. So in today's shaker box, we now have the 4mm screen, the 8mm screen, and the 19mm screen in addition to this bottom box. And if you add these top three screens up and actually multiply it by the dry matter and NDF content of that feedstuff, you can get an estimate of the physically effective fiber that's in the diet. So this is also important when we're looking at forages, because it can influence how forages ferment. So if you have, and how they pack in the silo as well, so if you have a lot of these long particles that are on these top screens, it's probably going to be harder to get that silage packed adequately and then influence your fermentation. So today I'm just going to show you an example of shaking out a TMR and a corn silage sample on this farm that's behind me, and show you how to use the box. Okay, so you start by assembling your box from smallest to largest on the top. And the way that you shake this box is you shake it back and forth 4 times, do a quarter turn, shake it back and forth 4 times, and you keep doing those quarter turns and shakes until you do 2 full rotations. Something that I find helpful is putting a marker on the top of my box so that I can keep track of where I'm at. So to get us started, I'm going to start with a corn silage sample. And you just put a little bit on top, approximately 300 grams or so. You don't want to put too much, otherwise it's not going to shake out well and your results are going to be inaccurate. So like I said, all you do is shake it back and forth 4 times, and make sure you do it rather vigorously. So I'm going to make sure that I use the whole width of my table here to shake it out. So you do 1, 2, 3, 4, quarter turn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was my first rotation, and now I go to my second. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. Okay. Now my sample is shaken out, and now I actually weigh what is left in each of these pans. But before I do that, I just want to give you a view of how this sample shook out. So by my visual inspection of this, it looks like it probably looks pretty good. Another thing, because this is corn silage, you can look at this third sieve and see if you can find any whole kernels in it. So I'm not seeing any in this one, so they have it processed probably pretty good. Your goal would be to find less than 2 broken kernels for corn silage. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is weigh the amount of forage material that was left in each sieve. So all you need for this is a small scale, something to write on, and some sort of weigh pan. These are actually takeout containers and they work pretty well, but you could use something like a paper plate or a grill tray or something like that. So make sure when you turn on your scale you have it set to the right units. I'm going to use grams. Put your weigh boat on it and tare it, which means zero it out so that you're weighing just the forage that's left over. So what I'm going to do is put the forage particles that were in this box in here to weigh it. And then write that down. So 4.9 grams. Okay, so now I'm here looking at what I wrote down for the weight of each sieve. So that's here in this column. This upper sieve is the 19 millimeter screen, and then our 8 millimeter screen, 4 millimeter screen, and then bottom pan. So all I did was I added up all these weights for my total here, and then I calculated the percentage that was left in each of them. So I have an example written up here how I calculated that for our top sieve. So you just take the amount that was left, divide it by the total, times 100, and for sake of demonstration I just rounded these numbers. So I had 2% left in that top, 64% in that 8 millimeter screen, 17% in the 4 millimeter screen, and then 16% came out on the bottom. So if I go at the top here where each of these recommendations are for corn silage, the upper sieve, the recommendation is 3 to 8%, and we were at 2. So maybe slightly lower, 45 to 65 for the next one, 64% right within target, 20 to 30 on the third one, and we were at 17, again below but not too far off. And then that bottom pan less than 10%, and we were at 16, so we were high. So I think with this, the overall thing with this box is it gives you an idea where you're at with particle distribution. I think the important part is also taking into consideration some different management things on the dairy and with that crop. So I don't have a test for this corn silage, but if I were to guess, it might be a little bit higher here on the bottom if it was a higher starch and it just had a lot of kernels in that crop. Another thing, which this dairy I don't think has a problem with, but we can shake out the TMR and see how that looks. Sometimes if I see a very high number on the bottom, maybe they have too much very highly digestible feedstuffs in their TMR, and it could cause milk fat depression because it's decreasing the pH of that rumen. But again, this is for corn silage, so let's go and take a look at their TMR and see how that shakes out. Okay, so now I shook out my TMR, and here is what that looks like visually. This sample up here was everything that was left on that top sieve, and then going down through each one, this is how much was left. And then I went ahead and weighed each of them already, and I had a total of about 280 grams. And then here was my percentage. So about 17% was left in that top sieve, and I go here to my column on my recommendations. and the recommended amount is 2 to 8%, so we were high on the amount of feed that was left on that top sieve. But then going down, I had 32%. The recommendation is 30 to 50, so good, within recommendations. 13% for the next one, 10 to 20, we're good, we're within. And then 38% left on that bottom pan, so again, within recommendations. Going back to this top sieve with the amount that was left in there, something that I also like to look at is looking at the stems that were left in here and seeing how many of them are longer than the muzzle of the cow. So here's one that's pretty long. Here's another one that's semi-long. Here's another one. So if we actually go over to our cow, we can see that that's much longer than the muzzle of her muzzle. Especially with these being jerseys, having that amount on their top sieve is probably going to be pretty easy for these cows to sort out. What I would do in this instance is probably ask the farmer when the last time was that they sharpened the blades on their TMR mixer or their chopper. I'm not quite sure what the full diet looks like, but this looks like a lot of alfalfa to me. So it might be something they need to think about. I'm not sure if they're seeing any milk fat depression or not. That would be another question I would ask this producer, but just something to keep in mind. Overall, I don't think it's too bad, especially if they're not having any production issues. But I just like using this box as a way to keep an eye on things and maybe help diagnose any problems that might be out there. So another reason you might want to do a particle distribution analysis is when you're chopping forages. So I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's important to do this analysis while you're chopping to make any adjustments ahead of time. It's always easier to be proactive than reactive. So if you are chopping this within recommendations and making adjustments during harvest time, you don't have to go back later and chop these forages smaller at a later time. You can get ahead of it and also make sure that it ferments well in the silo. So especially if we're coming up on corn silage season, make sure we're taking care to sharpen those blades and make any adjustments as we need to before we put it in there. So that's the Penn State Particle Separator in a nutshell. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, you can reach out. My email is kzm175@psu.edu, or you can reach out to any of the other educators in your local extension office or your Innovative Dairy Solutions consultant. So thank you and have a great day.